What is poppin' YouTube? Back again with another video. Today we're talking about my 8 players that are gonna boom in week 4 for fantasy football. You gotta take those upside shots. We all know that if you don't take those upside shots, you're not gonna win. A few weeks ago, DeAndre Swift was a boom. Last week, it was Devon A-Chain. And so we're gonna be talking through who those boom players could be in week 4 fantasy football. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and let's go. My first player that I think has some boom potential is going to be Josh Jacobs. Now, last week had 17 rushing attempts for 62 yards, 3 receptions, 18 receiving yards. Wasn't great. But this week, the Raiders are going up against the Los Angeles Chargers, 21st against the run. So this could be a good matchup, a good bounce back game for Josh Jacobs. We haven't seen that elite level ceiling that he's had in previous years. Like I said, he's not even in the top 12, top 15 running backs in fantasy football points. So I think this could be the week for Josh Jacobs to bounce back. I know a lot of people are in and out on Josh Jacobs. Where you having him in the ranking? You still got to rank him top 15 because that's the type of talent that Josh Jacobs is this week. So feel free to start Josh Jacobs. He's a big boom candidate for me. Moving on to my second boom for week 4 fantasy football is going to be James Cook. Last week, 15 rushing attempts, 98 yards, 2 receptions, 14 yards, 0 touchdowns. The thing that we like about James Cook is he continues to get the volume. Going into this season, we were saying if James Cook can only be a bell cow and or get some of this early down work, well, he's starting to get the early down work. And this week, they're going up against the Miami Dolphins, who are 26th against running backs for fantasy football. So we think this is a great matchup. It's going to be a high scoring game, going to be a lot of points scored, in my personal opinion, as good as the Miami Dolphins defense did look last week against the Broncos as they straight up demolished them. I think James Cook is going to be a big boom candidate this week. I think he has a really high end potential, and that's why I have him in my top 15 running backs this week. I do like James Cook as a boom. My third boom for week 4 fantasy football is going to be Tank Dell. We're riding the hot hand. You're starting Tank Dell if you have him, especially in your flex spots. Tank Dell, you probably picked him off waivers, but Tank Dell is overtaking Nico Collins as the wide receiver 1. Last week, too, if we look at his last 2 weeks, last week, even though he put up 25.5 fantasy points in PPR, wide receiver 7 on the week, he was only in there in 60% of snaps. 25 routes run with 7 total targets. That's absolutely insane. The week before that was in 77% of the snap share, where he put up 20.2 fantasy points. So you're riding the hot hand with Tank Dell. His snap share is only going to increase. Expect a big boom for Tank Dell this week. I think there's enough to even say that maybe I have him too low in our wide receiver rankings for this week. But like I said, Tank Dell is going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are 28th against wide receivers. Last week, 7 targets, 5 receptions, 145 yards, 1 touchdown. We like Tank Dell as another big boom. He's had the booms. I think that continues this week. We move on to my next boom, and I think Quentin Johnston is a must start, but I also think Josh Palmer is also a must start. I think this is the week where Josh Palmer always seems to step up when one of these Keenan Allen, Mike Williams goes down, and this is why you drafted him and or you just picked him off of waivers. Last week had 7 targets, 4 receptions, 66 receiving yards, and a touchdown, and that was in him. He was getting in there on the wide receiver 3 sets, but this week, assuming he's getting in on the 2 wide receiver sets, we are excited for Josh Palmer. Now, I think Quentin Johnston's also going to be very good, especially with this matchup. I think both of them are going to feast for fantasy, but Josh Palmer also could potentially be the one that absolutely goes berserk, goes absolutely Keenan Allen this week. We will see what happens with Josh Palmer. My next boom for week 4 fantasy football is going to be DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf has been super solid this season, but he hasn't had absolutely elite level fantasy football games. Last week, 8 targets, 6 receptions, 112 yards. This week, they're going up against the New York Giants, and the New York Giants haven't been able to stop anything coming at them. Defense, they don't have any defense. They have a fence. There's no D in the defense. So the thing we got to remember with DK Metcalf, he's still the wide receiver 1. Geno Smith continues to improve each and every week. And like I said, he's been super consistent. 13 fantasy points week 1, 13 fantasy points in week 2, and then 17 fantasy points last week. We just haven't seen this elite level touchdown upside. I mean, he got a touchdown in week 1, but he only has 1 touchdown on the season. When we've seen DK Metcalf absolutely produce for fantasy football is when he gets the 1-2 touchdowns. All of a sudden, he gets into that top teens, bottom 20s for fantasy football points per game, and that's what's exciting about DK Metcalf. I think he scored a touchdown this week. I think he's a great boom candidate and someone else that, of course, makes our players ready to boom for week 4. My next player that I think is ready to boom for week 4 is Darren Waller. Now, I know I just harped on how bad the Giants' defense has been, but the Giants' passing attack has been pretty mediocre, and last week wasn't great. With Saquon Barkley out, the defense were just able to not stack the box, were able to play coverage, but yet still stop the run. Darren Waller, week 3, 7 targets, 3 receptions, 20 receiving yards, only put up 5 fantasy points in PPR. That's not getting the job done for us. But the tight end landscape is just absolutely so bad. And Darren Waller, as much as you can say, well, maybe this just isn't his year, maybe he's just getting older, maybe he's recovering from this injury, I don't believe that. I believe Darren Waller has that boom potential. If we look at his first few weeks, 6 fantasy points, 13 fantasy points, 5 fantasy points. He's getting the targets, 5 targets in week 1, 8 targets in week 2, 7 targets last week. I think this week he eclipses the double-digit targets. I think he gets 10 targets, and I'm projecting 6 to 7 receptions for Darren Waller, 75 yards, and a touchdown. Now, while that might not be game-breaking to you, getting 15 fantasy points out of your tight end would be a huge boom week for my man Darren Waller. So I like Darren Waller this week as my next boom. Moving on to another player that I feel like could absolutely boom this week is going to be Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson absolutely got demolished last week versus the Dolphins. The offense looked bad. I mean, Cortland Sutton looked okay. Jared Judy had an okay day. But Russell Wilson, I think he's starting to get back to that old Russell Wilson, the elusive Russell Wilson. They're going up against the Chicago Bears, 28th against quarterbacks. Like we said, last week, 306 passing yards, 1 total touchdown. As the Dolphins put up 70 points on the Denver Broncos, I think this week it's a great matchup against the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears defense is absolutely atrocious, as well as their offense. So I think the Denver Broncos win mightily, as much as some people aren't looking forward to that game. My final boom player that we're going to talk about today is Michael Thomas. Now, Michael Thomas, we've been quiet to talk about Michael Thomas because, let's be honest, he usually plays 4 games and then decides to retire for the rest of the season. But he's looked good. In the games, he's looked really good. And this week we got Alvin Kamara coming back, which is just furthermore going to alleviate and let Michael Thomas cook on a week-to-week basis. With Chris Olave, with Rashid Shaheed, with Alvin Kamara in the backfield, we're looking at the last 3 weeks, and he's been super consistent. 11 fantasy points, 12 fantasy points, 11 fantasy points. And he's getting around 9 to 8 targets a game, and that's pretty good. But I think this week he finally eclipses that double digits, gets 10 total targets. We're talking probably 7 receptions. If Michael Thomas can eclipse 10 total targets this week versus Tampa Bay, Tampa Bay's offense has been pretty electric. I think it's a good matchup for Michael Thomas. I think Michael Thomas is in for a big boom week in week 4 fantasy football. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you're new. Trying to help you win your fantasy football matchups each and every day. Ask me any start-sit question down below. We will be back again with another video tomorrow talking about some mustache players that you should be picking up ahead of week 4 fantasy football so that, of course, you get them on your team before they go big. So appreciate you tuning in. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.